evening's neurodiversity panel. Now, neurodiversity is the idea that there's natural variation in how people's brains work, how we experience, understand, and interact with the world. The terms neurodivergence and neurodiversity aren't medical diagnoses, but a part of a social movement that advocates for accepting and including people with neurological differences. This movement began in the 1990s and aims to highlight the strengths and values of diversity in society. Conditions like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and OCD are examples, though not everyone with these conditions identify as neurodivergent. As awareness grows, so does acceptance. Many countries now have laws that ensure school accommodations, protection against workplace sports. Media representation of neurodivergent characters is increasing, helping to build understanding, and scientific research continues to offer deeper insight into how different brains work and thrive. All of this reflects a shift towards a more inclusive, accepting society, a sign of real progress. Now, we're excited to begin today's discussion and hear from our panelists. Thank you for being here.
So our first question is, how can people create a safe environment where neurodivergent people feel comfortable asking for support?
Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mr. McIntosh, and I'm speaking to you today as not only a teacher, but also a parent. I have two children, one who is neurodivergent, and the other is typical. So, based on my experience over the years, the most important thing that you can do as a parent and any member of a community is to try and determine what does the person like to do. And that's really important. The reason why I say that is because, of course, all of us have very different interests. And in the school, it's really important that we try and create an environment that offers lots of different activities and interests so that a lot of people will like to join it. So for my elder son's schooling, we had to create different types of programs for him. But at the end of the day, it worked out really well, and we had a lot of cooperation from the school, and he also had a lot of peer buddies who would help him throughout his schooling career. So it made a tremendous difference, and also I think it was really helpful for the peer buddies because they learned a lot as well.
Hello everyone, my name is Miss Alexina, for those who don't know me. I'm on the panel today and I'm speaking as a woman who has been diagnosed with ADHD. I was diagnosed a bit later in life, and I just want to reflect on my experiences because I know neurodivergence and neurodiversity is a lot different for females as it is for males. So from my personal experience, I got diagnosed really late in life, and when I was diagnosed, I was about 22 years old. I found that I felt a lot of shame about my diagnosis. And a lot of the shame came from the language that was taught to me in schools and language my peers would use about neurodiversity, whether it was used in a derogatory way or the generalizations about neurodiversity, especially ADHD. Maybe you're just lazy, maybe you're really hyper and disruptive, and I viewed this as something that was going to be a barrier in my life. So I think for you guys as students, the best way that you can mobilize people feeling supported is really working on your language. And one thing I learned at university is using person-first language. And how we do this is saying, instead of saying, oh, that person has autism, or sorry, that's an autistic person, you say, oh, for instance, Alexina has ADHD, not she is an ADHD person. So you're putting the person before their condition, and just me understanding how that works and using that language change made me understand that I'm a person before my diagnosis every single day, as is everyone else. And that's a great way that you guys can make a change in your everyday language that's going to make other people feel more supported.
I think I saw that sort of final thing at the end there. I think, so I have ADD, a slightly different one, AD without ADHD without the H. But I was diagnosed, I guess when I was in high school, middle school kind of age, perhaps even younger than that. I think, you know, the words of empathy really come to mind here, right? And patience as well. Some of the, you know, there are still struggles that come in adult life, right? You know, a lot of the time, especially when you know, you do often think about how you can manage whatever condition you may have. But it doesn't mean you don't struggle with it. It doesn't mean it's still not kind of a part of your everyday experience. And I found that just the willingness to keep it in mind from, you know, people around me, whether they know I have a condition or not, has always been very, very helpful. Right? Rather than thinking in one straightforward way to, you know, encompass a variety of different ways to approach thinking of a problem.
What are some wrong ideas people have about neurodivergence, and how do they affect your willingness to share your experiences?
Thank you. Again, from the perspective of a parent, I remember when my son was first diagnosed, he was diagnosed at the age of 3. So that's pretty young. And we were fortunate just for the fact that we were able to try and get a grasp on things and figure things out. However, I will say that there were members of the community who were still not as, how shall I say, enlightened about the condition. So there were people who would ostracize my son and also at the same time not include him. But I must admit, for the most part, though, over time, of course, as they got to know him and then special programs were created, life got better. But it wasn't easy at first for the parents and, of course, for the child.
Thank you. So for me, I find that as the awareness about neurodiversity has increased so much, especially in the last 10 years or so, I find that now, especially everyone on TikTok, they get videos about what ADHD might be or what autism might be, and often I find people diagnosing themselves online. I think for me, the hardest thing I found when I was sharing my experience with my ADHD, which has been diagnosed, is many people will go, oh, well, I have it too, or I feel the same way as you do, and that really makes it feel like it's not a safe space for me to share my feelings, because while many people in ADHD or people on the spectrum have qualities that other people do have at times, it's not to the same extent. It's like, the best way I can describe it is, you might have an injury, and I have an injury, but I have a nerve that's exposed. And that nerve that's exposed is going to feel so many things to a much deeper extent. I'm going to experience so many things to a much harsher extent because of my diagnosis. That's the difference between maybe someone who's neurotypical and someone who's neurodiverse, is the amount of struggle they experience and how kind of prominent that feeling is. So that's just something to keep in mind. And when you see stuff online, is really make sure you're talking to a doctor first if it's something you're really concerned about.
And almost on the flip side of that, I think there is also sometimes a reaction from people that when you sort of expose this about yourself, to sometimes hear from those people, oh, you just self-diagnosed, right? You don't really you're not really that way. This has especially been something that, you know, I don't know how appropriate the term malfunction is anymore. Like I'm not sure if that's like a word that's often used, but when it's not something that's causing that requires major intervention. Like so, for example, sometimes people with ADHD or ADD need serious medication to manage the condition. That's not the case for me, but you know that lack of severity doesn't mean it's not there. It hasn't been diagnosed, and I think that sometimes when people express this as a different place along that spectrum of severity, there can be a tendency for people to just doubt it. They just completely doubt that there's anything different about the way they think, and that they're just making excuses for forgetfulness or for laziness. Especially a problem with ADD and ADHD is that you know the way your mind works can make it very, very just like, oh no, you're just being lazy. And I think that's a challenge sometimes in admitting, coming out and saying you have a struggle with that.
In your experience, are there gender differences that impact neurodivergence? Like, for example, would you say society is genuinely more positive towards neurodivergent individuals of a specific gender, or could a person's gender affect the way they experience neurodivergence?
Thank you. I know some of the statistics with regards to diagnosis. So my understanding is that boys are diagnosed 3 times as often as girls when it comes to autism. And I know when my son was growing up, it was more unusual to see a girl who was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And I do feel that people did tend to treat the boys a little bit differently than they did the girls with regards to the activities that were created. My understanding of the programs that are available, most of the programs tend to be more sort of programs that boys tend to like to do. I'll have to check because my son's now 23, but growing up at the time, definitely the programs that were created were definitely more boy-centered. So I think things might have changed since then. That would be something definitely to look at.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier in the panel, I'm a female who struggles with ADHD, and because I'm a female, it's really helped me mask my symptoms until when I got into kind of an adult life, and then you don't have just the stresses of school, you now have the stresses of managing your bills and living on your own. That's when my ADHD symptoms really came to light, and I started to notice problems in my everyday life that I couldn't ignore anymore. So that's something I find that historically women have had to manipulate themselves into society, whether it's their level of femininity, whether it's adapting to a male-dominated workforce. There's many things that we have to do that we have learned from a historical age how to adapt to society's standards. So I think it comes from more than just maybe girls presenting a different way, but also the way that we understand that we are in a survival mode, that we know that we have to keep up with society to maintain our assertion and our dominance as females. So that's something to keep in mind. And I find that, specifically with ADHD, what I experienced would be I would not pay attention in class, but I wouldn't be disruptive as maybe generally a boy or a man would show up in class. But I would, zone out, or I would look out into the window, and I would constantly do that. Even Miss J will mention to me sometimes, she'll go, oh, you're in the zone again, and this is just a function of my ADHD, and it's a sign that it's not a bad thing. It's me doing something, but it's also my symptoms coming to light in a way that might be a boy kind of getting loud or disrupting class. It's different in females that way.
I don't know how much I have to say on this one, other than I have seen, you spend enough time on the internet and you see people discussing these things, and the internet being what it is, these discussions are not always polite or nice or engaging with that empathy that's so necessary. And just, I certainly have seen people, women who come online and talk about their experiences as somebody who's on the autism spectrum or something, and people just be very, very dismissive of it. Accuse them of just seeking attention or just, and I very rarely see that attitude expressed towards men who talk about having autism. This assumption that it's just a matter of narcissism or desire to feel special or whatever else, right? And so I think that has been a notable thing that I've witnessed, kind of not in my experience as somebody with ADD, but as somebody kind of seeing how people talk about it in unfiltered social spaces.
How does societal expectation about being
I think in this day and age, society's come a long way with regards to acceptance. Like I said, my son's now 23 years old, and I know over the years there are many more programs designed to help people and assist people who are neurodivergent. So our society really has come a long way, especially in the school systems. I know it's very inclusive, and the students were really, really cooperative, helpful towards my son. So I'm quite optimistic for the future with regards to this. So I think we're on the right track, at least here. Now, I don't know, I'd be fascinated to talk to some of you about how it's in your own countries. I don't know. I've spent some time in Japan, and it's a lot different than it is here. But maybe in your own countries, it would be quite interesting. Hopefully, you'll learn something when you're in Canada. So when you go back, you'll be able to hopefully bring a more positive connection to the neurodivergent community.
Okay, thanks. So I'm just gonna speak from personal experience here. So generally, before that, I want to preface it with people who are neurodivergent definitely experience mental health, like anxiety and depression, at a much higher rate than a neurotypical person. And that often has to do with these expectations of society that are put on us that make us feel that we might be they're holding up an image to us that we're not ever going to resemble. And that can be really, really tiring, because as much as you try and as much as work you put in, you're never going to fit what that neurotypical pillar of society looks like. So, for instance, something that I have struggled with in the past is when I'm going to school or if I'm working 9 to 5, I have to maintain my focus for 40 hours a week. And that's a lot of sustained focus for me, and something that I feel very drained by the end of the week. So sometimes I'll go home and I'll sleep for 12 hours. And I will feel like doing absolutely nothing on the weekend. And then I start to feel really bad about myself, because I'm going, oh, I should be using my weekends to see my friends, and I should be cleaning up after myself more, and I need to do these things that other people are doing. And me comparing myself to the neurotypical person definitely has a decrease on my mental health. And it's something that we just need to be mindful of, that whatever it takes you guys to do a normal day is about 50% harder for someone who's neurodiverse. So imagine just the mental and physical toll that can take on someone, and how that might affect their anxiety and depression levels.
I can share a story from when I was younger. When I was in elementary school, I don't know how common this is now, but there was often when I was in elementary school, these gifted classes. So the idea is that students who needed more of a challenge, needed more of an alternative curriculum, we put into these gifted groups. Now, I was never put directly into one, although apparently there were conversations about it. But the perception from the other students was not these are smart students, is that these are there's a ruder word for it, but these are the neurologically diverse students. These are the neurodiverse students. These are the ones these are the weird ones, right? That's probably the politest word I could use for it. And I definitely remember absorbing some of that as well, right? I remember maybe even feeling grateful I was not put with them, kind of thing, right? There was very much this separation of separation of them from being normal. Now, of course, they were moved into a totally different classroom, and this only really sort of maybe exacerbated the issue. I haven't really looked into the pedagogical or the education reasoning for this, but certainly there is, I think, the desire for us to do that. The last story I'll share with this then is when I was interviewing for women teaching overseas, right? The interview generally went well. One of the feedback I got was that I would often fidget with my hands, and I don't know if I'm now calling attention to it for people who have noticed it or not, but sometimes I'll find myself holding like a soft tap that I use to stick things on the wall and just kind of like guess using it as a stress ball, almost. Not that I'm stressed, but just that it's something that is part of the movements of hands and stuff, as part of a thinking process for me. And I was told in an interview that this is something that students could potentially mock, that I needed to control this, that I needed to, not do this because I would be making a target out of myself in a classroom full of students. Never seems to have been a problem, but this was a conscious piece of feedback I once got. And so there are all these little pressures to be normal that come, for sure.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
If no one has any questions, we'll just ask one more. So in what ways do expectations from society affect how openly you express your preferences?
You asked that.
Yes, so if my understanding of the question is correct, so you're asking us, how then do people who are neurodivergent fit into society? Is that right? So how do expectations from society impact them? Again, from the perspective of a parent, I think people who are neurodivergent, of course, are often, like my son, for example, stress is a huge concern for him. So expectations, if he doesn't meet those expectations that are sort of established, he will react in a negative way. His anxiety will start to kick in. So as a result, I think, like I said, the most important thing that as a parent, what we always try to do is to ensure that we put him in an environment where he knows that he'll be accepted and we know that it's something that he likes doing. And as a result, I think in the long run, it's helped him immensely in terms of dealing with his anxiety. But again, it's rather challenging sometimes to find what that environment's going to be. That's always an ongoing issue.
I think for me personally, it's been quite the journey, especially as I diagnosed a later diagnosis. I had a later diagnosis. It really affected me, and I was in my last year of university, and it helped me try and understand when I go to apply for jobs, how will these workplaces view me, and is it a safe space for me to disclose my diagnosis? So, for instance, when I came to Bodwell, it wasn't something I wanted to disclose off the bat. I wanted to see how I would adapt to the work environment, because previously I would work from home, and working from home is a lot easier to manage your symptoms. You're not outward facing, talking to people all the day. It doesn't drain you as much. So I found my adjustment when I started working here was very intense, and it wasn't until I was in Parliament meeting with other students who started disclosing their neurodiversity. I felt that if I speak on this, I'm creating a safe space for these students, and they don't have to go through the same struggles I do. So that's something that I keep in mind, but I also need to understand that if a workplace isn't accepting of it, is that a place I want to be in? And luckily, Bodwell is a great place to be, and they're very accepting of this. And if I need accommodations for my work, it's a safe space for me to ask that. So just keep that in mind if you're feeling like you might not be accepted in the workforce. Maybe understand that not all workforces are for you.
I have on occasion, there are times where, as Ms. Alexina pointed out, where you just feel you can't be around people, you can't be around noise, you have to kind of retreat into yourself for a bit. And I've never felt, particularly pushed away by any friends or anything like that, but there are times where I feel self-conscious about the fact that I don't want to go out and do something, or I don't want to, I just want to stay at home, as being like, it's weird that I don't have a reason for it. So I'll just even if that reason makes me sound like I'm selfish or lazy, that's better than revealing the actual reason, which is just part of the symptom of being neurodivergent. And and that's not even necessarily a conscious thought process I go through. It's just my gut reaction will be to make something up rather than just assume that it will be taken. Assume that a reason isn't necessary, right? So I think that there is even subconsciously a little bit of something there, even if it's not even true of the group that people in it.
Thank you for attending this neurodiversity panel. We hope you gained some valuable information from our panelists, and remember to stay mindful and stay accepting. Thank you.